Week. I'm Chris Drew from Menace to Sports. That's my guy, Ron James from Best Damn Media. We got a great episode for you today, talking all, honestly, just a bold prediction show, what we're expecting to see, what we're looking forward to seeing, and then some of the ins and outs that you may not know about Wisconsin and all the odd connections, honestly, to Ohio State. My guy, Ron, though, what's good, man?
Nothing much, man. It's been hard to keep the eye on the prize and worry about the opponent this week with so much stuff going on in the college football landscape. But man, we got a football game to play on Saturday, and I hope the guys in the Woody are more focused than I am right now because my eyes have been on Michigan this entire week, and we got a game on Saturday. So I am hoping that everybody inside the Woody Hayes Athletic Center is focused on the challenge ahead of us this week.
Yeah, need everybody locked in. Obviously, for me at least, because of the work I do, I've been so invested into learning every detail about this Michigan stuff that sometimes I feel like, we might be on a bye week this week. At least that's kind of my standpoint on the way out. And Ryan Day had a lot of really good stuff he said at the last press conference. The issue is there was two bombshells that came right after the press conference. So not even Ohio State fans are talking about it. But obviously, we hope that everybody's, more locked in than we are, more locked in than we are. But again, it is Wisconsin week. Ohio State is in the middle of a championship run. I've had some revelations about this team. I feel really good about kind of where they are as a team and coaching wise. And Wisconsin, while, they're down more than they are usually, they're still a formidable opponent, and they have Mr. Luke Fickell himself kind of behind the wheel.
Exactly. Former Buckeye leading the charge for Wisconsin. A little bit of a down year from what we traditionally see. That's normally the Big Ten West power that we see, especially during the crossover matchups. When the schedule comes out and you see who the crossover opponents are, you have an eye out for Wisconsin and Iowa because those seem to be the two biggest challenges on that side. And I think the Buckeyes dodged a bullet here with catching Wisconsin on a down year.
Yeah, and, we'll talk about it more when things happen. But if Michigan does end up falling off a cliff and their situation changes entirely, I would expect a team like Wisconsin and Michigan State to both greatly benefit from that because those are the two schools that do recruit regionally. So that's definitely at play here. Want to talk Luke Fickell. Played at Ohio State, was on the defensive staff at Ohio State. He won a natty at Ohio State. He ran the famous press quarters coverage in 2014 that went on a ridiculous 3-game run against 3 Heisman finalists, Melvin Gordon, Amari Cooper, and then Marcus Mariota, shut them all down to win a natty. He left Ohio State, went on to Cincy, took them to a college football playoff, and along the way, coached his fair share of NFL players, the one being Kobe Bryant, who's a really good player there in Seattle, playing some safety, and then Sauce Gardner, another really good corner, obviously one of the league's top 10 corners. Luke Fickell's the man, Ron. Like, I don't know how you feel about Luke, but I'm a big Luke Fickell guy.
I'm a big Fick guy, and I know Fick has to be looking side-eyed at Ryan Day right now because Ryan Day stays poaching guys off of Luke Fickell's staff. You talked about Sauce Gardner and the success that he had. Ryan Day went and grabbed Perry Eliano off the staff. He grabbed Al Washington. Ryan Day's not afraid to dip into the backyard and steal from Fick, so I know he has to be frustrated with Ryan Day right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So Luke Fickell, I give a ton of credit for being a guy who's not only a great head coach, a great motivator, but also is really good at evaluating talent. I mean, he was able to take some of these young coaches that really didn't have too big of names and then turn them into now big-time coaches. If you look at Perry Eliano, I mean, he had Kobe Bryant and Sauce Gardner on the same team, both guys that were low recruited. He coached both of them. They both ended up being, elite college corners. I mean, Kobe won the Thorpe Award, and Sauce Gardner went top 10 in the draft. Like, that doesn't happen at Cincinnati, like, ever. Their DC, Marcus Freeman, another Buckeye. He went on to have a massive shoot up through the ranks, and now he is the head coach at Notre Dame, obviously. And Notre Dame is a legit top 15 team, a really good program who just knocked off USC a couple weeks ago. So, I mean, you look at Fickell. He's done a really, really good job with defensive coaches. He's proven he could be a CEO. I think he's got a chance to do something really, really cool at Wisconsin and kind of build them up to be the Michigan State team of past.
Absolutely. And he could take over that he could become the Big Ten West power now that he has a chance to really sink his teeth into that program. He's in his first year. They're still at the top of the Big Ten already. We talked to Big Ten West. We talked about it being a down year for Wisconsin, but they're still at the top of their division. We're going to see divisions go away. It's going to be interesting to see how they perform in the upcoming landscape of the Big Ten, but they still have things somewhat rolling, especially from what he inherited before.
Absolutely. And he's been a guy that's been really active in terms of like going in the portal. He's been a guy that's been really active in going to get coaches. I mean, we're going to talk about it a little bit later, but one of the more underrated moves this entire offseason was Luke Fickell, who's always been a hard-nosed, tough guy. Also, Luke Fickell has a starting quarterback in the NFL too, Desmond Ridder, who's not playing that bad. So just want to throw that out there too. Just a guy who can really evaluate and get guys to the league and as well as develop. Now, he went and got Phil Longo from North Carolina. That's North Carolina former OC and quarterback coach of Mr. Drake May. If you've heard of him, heard he's pretty good. Going to be a top 10 pick in the draft. Really, really well-respected coordinator who could have went to a lot of places, probably including Alabama. Luke Fickell went, identified it early, and the first Big Ten team to run an offense so heavily influenced by the air raid. I do know that Mike Leach and Phil Longo were pretty close, and Leach was excited about that beforehand. So just for you at least and for the chat, Ron, all that being said, we talked about how good Luke is. Should he be first in line to be the Ohio State head coach if Ryan Day opts to go to the NFL?
And we just launched that in the chat, so let us know your guys' thoughts. Me personally, we were just talking about this about a week ago about who do we want next, and you said Vrabes, and I'm like, did something happen to our guy Fick? Are you a closet Wisconsin fan? Like you're not trying to steal their coach? Fick is number one on my list just because I'm a sucker for Buckeyes. I'm that Ohio State fan. It's like, I mean, we're having trouble in that position room. Why don't we go hire a former Buckeye? That'll solve everything. These guys, these outsiders just don't get it. And I'm always about hiring internally and having a former Buckeye. So that is absolutely my number one pick. You see what he was able to do at Cincinnati. He completely understands the Midwest landscape when it comes to recruiting and how much it means to be from Ohio and play for the Ohio State. It understands that mentality. We talk about Ohio being a part of bringing BIA back. Fick is a guy that understands things like that, and I would love to see Fick back at Ohio State.
Yeah, Fick is big time. I'm a big Luke Fickell fan. I did say Vrabel and Dan Lanning were my other two. I think I have like something with Dan Lanning. He coaches like his hair is on fire and kind of like feels like young Urban with the insanity that he coaches with. And I think I do kind of miss a little bit of that. I think that Luke Fickell is more cut from that trestle cloth, that more mature competitive spirit. And I think me, because I'm immature, I like the immature competitive spirit. But no, Fickell's the man. And I'm a big Fickell fan. Watching what he did at Cincinnati was really incredible to watch. I mean, they made the playoffs. They made the playoffs, what, the same time Michigan did? Like, we're talking about somebody who, in the face of it, almost beat Georgia the year before if it wasn't for some special teams blunders, and then made it to the college football playoff in a season where they had to go beat Notre Dame with Brian Kelly, who was heavily favored. And he went and beat Brian Kelly, and Marcus Freeman was on that staff too. He lost his DC just to beat his DC in the regular season and get to the playoffs. So I'm a huge Fickell guy. I don't think Ryan Day is leaving anytime soon, but it is nice to know that of the candidates, he is building himself to be a really, really solid one. And I know that he wants the chance to avenge the loss to Michigan in 2011 when he was the interim head coach. And that was the last time Michigan beat Ohio State legally.
Yeah, with this investigation going on, you look at the last two wins a little funny, and then you have to go all the way back to an interim coach. I saw that graphic floating around on Twitter all week. The last three wins Michigan has over Ohio State, it says two markers next to the past 2 years saying cheater, and then one next to Luke Fickell's year that says interim coach. And then you have to go back even further before you find a Michigan win. So, yeah, I'm sure he would love to avenge that loss. And now that he's at Wisconsin, he may not get a chance to do that at Ohio State, but he will get a chance to do it in the Big Ten.
Yeah, he will get a shot in the Big Ten, and I'm absolutely thrilled for that. Want to jump ahead and talk about this game because it is an intriguing game. It is a game that has a little bit of kind of the quote unquote formula for an upset. You have 5-2 Wisconsin. They're playing at Wisconsin, Camp Randall at night with all the distractions. Is that a letdown or potential upset formula for Wisconsin, and how much does that concern you?
I mean, any away game at night should worry you, especially in the Big Ten with some of those stadiums and how raucous the crowds can get. But I think with the team that Wisconsin has this year, I don't think that they're going to be able to move the ball enough on Ohio State. Ohio State has significantly improved their run game. I know they have a great running back, but I just don't see them being able to put up enough points. We haven't been able to see Drew Aller, a dynamic quarterback that we believe in, able to put up the points. We haven't seen a veteran quarterback, Sam Hartman, be able to put up the points every week. The magical number, 17. Can the Buckeyes hold the team to 17? And I think that gets them the win. And I do not see Wisconsin being able to pass that number this year.
They do have who I consider to be the best running back in the Big Ten, Braylon Allen. He's second in the Big Ten in rushing yards with 704. He's been really, really good this year, Ron. Want to talk about him? I mean, he's 6'2", 245, going to run in the 4.4s, has power, knows how to run behind his shoulder pads. As a 17-year-old freshman, was thrusted into the role of starting running back at Wisconsin when he really went there to probably be a linebacker. The kid is good. He's going to get, he's an NFL draft pick good. He's workhorse good. He's like the next in line of the great Wisconsin running backs, and he has become that. What is your confidence level that Ohio State can keep the Big Ten second leading rusher bottled up?
Very high. I would say an 8 on a scale of 1 to 10 for the simple fact that I feel like these running teams in the Big Ten play right into Ohio State's hands as far as what they like to do the most on defense, and that's keep Sonny Styles on the field. And when they're playing a team like Wisconsin that doesn't have a super dynamic slot threat and tends to run the ball more, you're able to keep Sonny Styles on the field more. And I think that plays into Ohio State's hand. You talk about him being second in the Big Ten in rushing. And when we were doing our pre-show notes, we talked about who was number one, and it might be a little surprising, and it's Rutgers running back. We've seen some dynamic backs this year. Where would you rank him as far as the backs that Ohio State has seen this year? We saw Audric Estime. We saw the two-headed monster at Penn State. We've had plenty of discussions about the best backs in the Big Ten, and I feel like just because he's in the Big Ten West and doesn't play for one of the big three, he gets left out of the discussion. But some might argue, and I definitely saw the arguments on the timeline on Twitter before the season, that Allen was the best running back coming into the season. So where do you have him ranked?
Oh, I think he's better than Estime, if I'm being completely honest. I think he's got more wiggle. Estime is a really good back, a really good workhorse back. But I think speed, wiggle paired with the size, he's probably bigger than Estime as well, which is kind of wild.
He is. Estime's 228.
Yeah. So for the Braylon Allen kid to be up around 245.
Talking almost 20 pounds heavier.
Yeah, and to be faster as well. Like Braylon Allen, he's got some significant burst to him at that size and was able to really outrun people. I mean, his freshman year, he ripped off a couple huge runs at the end of the game against Ohio State. And we know Ohio State has such elite athletes on the back end. I mean, I know the coverage skills might be a concern, but they're all fast. And so watching someone who weighs 245 run away from them is wild. I think Braylon's the best back they faced this year. I think that maybe he doesn't get kind of the buzz and the name recognition in large part because Wisconsin has not been that elite team or that really, really good team or that media darling that a school like Notre Dame has been. So a lot of it's PR, but don't sleep. That kid can play. He's an NFL player, and he's a really good back. Want to ask you, you said you're confident they'll bottle him up. Braylon Allen, that's for the chat as well. Braylon Allen will have what? Less than 50 yards, between 50 and 100 yards, over 100 or over 150?
I think between 50 and 100. I think the defense is going to get on them early. I feel like this offense is going to have an emphasis on getting started early. Kyle McCord in his recent interview acknowledged that if this team is going to be a championship team, that his play needs to elevate. I think he's going to take the criticism that he's heard in the last week and try to get things together this week. And I see this offense getting out to an early start, and I feel like it's going to force Wisconsin to throw the ball more towards the end of the game, and I think it's going to limit his touches. A question that we didn't have in the notes that I want to get from you is the Ohio State has had such an emphasis on limiting the big play, and we saw what big runs were able to do to Ohio State against the team up north last year. Do you think that they are going to be able to limit those explosive runs this week? We haven't seen many long runs. I think Penn State ripped off a 30-yard run this past week. And if it's off the top of my head, I believe that was the longest run that they gave up this year. Do you think they give up a run longer than that this year, a run of 40-plus yards or this week?
I don't think so. I think that I wouldn't be surprised if Braylon Allen got to 100 yards, but I think if he does, it'll be a lot of – no, I would be surprised if he got to 100 yards. I think it will be under 100 yards. I think you'll see him on schedule a lot, like 4-5, 4-5. But I don't think they'll be able to drive down the field that way. So I don't think he'll rip off any super long runs. I wouldn't be surprised if he ripped off a 20-er, but I don't think Ohio State's going to give up a long touchdown to him this week.
Sounds good. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the key to them. And I think this will be another – we talk about every week. Is this a test? We call every week a test, and I feel like this is a good test for the running defense. I mean, we haven't seen too many explosive rushing attacks. I mean, we did see Penn State last week, but they didn't have much success running the ball, and I feel like this will be another challenge for them. They were forced to pass a lot on third down, so it'll be interesting to see how this front holds up against a running back as dynamic as Braylon.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's a different looking running scheme than Wisconsin runs previously. Phil Longo's a guy who likes to spread the ball out a lot. So like they'll spread the field out. They'll go 4 wide, they'll go 3 wide, and they will run the ball out of the shotgun, which is really different than what we've seen from Wisconsin previously. And because of that, DBs that they've played have had to be so good in tackling because, like we said, 6'2", 245 running out there. We know these DBs are about 6 foot 180. When they play. So guys got to be good tacklers because they are out in space. It's going to be really important this game for our defensive ends to maintain, contain. And that's JTT and Jack Sawyer, something they've done really well all year. I know a lot of people are frustrated with the lack of sacks, but I think that discipline is going to be big time this week. So I am interested to see how Braylon Allen looks.
And you talked about the emphasis on tackling from our cornerbacks. I think this is probably the best year for that when you talk about guys like David Igbinosun, a healthy Denzel Burke. I don't know if he'll be back this game, but last year we talked about his disinterest in tackling and how perplexing that was to see someone so disinterested in tackling on defense, but come to find out he did have a shoulder injury last year that it seemed like he was protecting. But this year we've seen Denzel willing to get his nose into things and really lay the wood on defense. So I'm glad to see him back out there healthy, and I think that'll be an added plus for this defense that we have a fully healthy cornerback ready to tackle, and then a guy like David Igbinosun that's so physical and willing to tackle. I say every week I look up and say, who was that made that tackle? And it's David Igbinosun doing the dirty work at corner.
It's so cool watching Davis and Igbinosun get in the box. Also, I want to give flowers to Jordan Hancock, who was so good in the run game last week against Penn State and shooting gaps and triggering and playing really well. So this is probably the best tackling secondary I've seen since those really, really elite groups. I want to talk about the Wisconsin throw game and how they look. So Wisconsin has a new starting quarterback. Tanner Mordecai got hurt, broke his hand a couple weeks ago. Last week, Mr. Braden Locke had his first start, and he's got a unique connection with the Buckeyes.
Yeah, we just launched a question for the chat to see if you guys know, but we talked about in the beginning of the show a lot of the unique crossovers between these two teams, and there is a little crossover between the quarterback at Wisconsin and former Ohio State receiver. So we have the question in the chat. Wisconsin's QB, Braden Locke, was the high school quarterback of which former OSU wide receiver?
See, for that one, it requires you know where he's from. And then once you know what state he's from, it kind of trims the answers. But there isn't an obvious one, but it definitely is a really, really big time question.
And we put a little trickery in there because we put 2 wide receivers that did play in that state that ended up at Ohio State. So even if you do know the state, might not lean to it. Drum roll, please. Braden Locke and Jackson Smith-Njigba were high school teammates at Rockwell in Texas.
Yeah, and they were the duo behind one of the more legendary playoff runs ever in the state. I mean, there was a run in there where JSN had 5 touchdowns in a semifinal game.
Not just in a semifinal game, in Dallas Cowboys Stadium.
Yep.
Like, they went absolutely crazy. I talk about this as being one of the greatest highlight tapes in the history of college football. I urge all of you, after watching this, make sure that you go check it out. Jackson Smith-Njigba's high school highlights are the greatest high school football highlights that I have ever seen. When I first saw JSN's high school highlights, I was like, this is going to be the greatest wide receiver of all time. Like, I've never seen tape look like this. It is the most absurd high school tape you will ever see. One-handed catches, toe taps in the back of the end zone, just ridiculous stuff against ridiculous competition in the state of Texas. So what those two were able to do together was crazy.
Yeah, I've never seen Jerry Rice's high school tape, but I'm sure it didn't look like Jackson's.
It definitely wasn't as clear, I tell you that.
Yeah. That's part of it. But Braden Locke stepping in.
Does not have Jackson Smith-Njigba, so it does not worry me.
There is no JSN there. Last week was his first start, Ron. He went 21 for 41, 2 touchdowns, and 0 interceptions. Phil Longo and company obviously trust him to throw 40 times in your first game, first start for a freshman feels like some big time trust. What is more likely, a passing touchdown from him or the freshman throwing an interception this week against Ohio State?
I'm going to go with more likely. I will go with touchdown.
Okay.
More likely to happen first, interception.
Okay. There it is.
I think they do find a way to get on the board. We saw the defense relax a little bit in the third quarter, and especially with the recent injuries that we saw, I feel like they're going to be more inclined to get guys more reps as we get into the later half of the season and try to keep guys rested for the postseason. Jim Knowles talked in the beginning of the season about the need for rotation, not only to have guys prepared to play, but have the starters prepared to play later in the season, and the amount of reps that they had on their body because they rotated so little. We saw in the Notre Dame game, we didn't rotate any of our defensive ends. JTT and Jack Sawyer played every single snap. We saw Denzel Burke get hurt in the third quarter late in the game where the Buckeyes were up. I do think you will see more of a rotation on defense just to keep some of these guys healthy, and I think you could see a cheap touchdown in later in the game.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how the kid plays. Drew Aller's thing was always about keeping the ball safe. This kid's got a little bit more gunslinger to him, a little shorter, a little stockier. Did have a fumble last week, even though he did not have an interception that ended up being a turnover. A kid that likes to air it out. That's why he's there with Phil Longo. So, on the numbers side, Braden Locke, will he be under 100 yards, between 100 and 200 yards, 200 to 250, or you think he goes for 250 plus against this Ohio State team?
I think he goes under 150 passing yards.
Okay, under 150. I could definitely see it. I'm curious kind of what their plan of attack will be. Want to jump on over to the Ohio State offense. Wisconsin has been a really good defensive unit under Luke Fickell. Luke Fickell traditionally has had very good defensively sound teams. As a former DC, that is kind of his staple. It's his defense. Obviously did a good job at Ohio State, Cincy, and now Wisconsin. They've only allowed over 20 points twice and only allowed over 30 points once. Very well coached on that side of the ball. Travion Henderson is now healthy. He told media that he is 100% good to go, and as he should be. Will Travion Henderson bring some juice back to the run game?
I think so. We saw the run game be sufficient last week, but it was definitely missing a punch. And I feel like the thing that makes this room so dynamic is that they have so many guys that do different things well. And I feel like the run game becomes one-dimensional when we have a singular back. But when we do have that rotation of power and explosion, I think this run game goes to a different level. And I think having the rotation of Chip, Mayan, and Travion will elevate the run game that we see this week. And while we've seen the one long Chop run against Minnesota last year, you don't see Chop get loose too often. And I think that Trey adds an element to this offense that no one else does with his speed and explosion.
Yeah, I honestly think they need it. I kind of felt the missing of Trey the last couple weeks, even though I've always been kind of a chip and chop guy. But the need for the explosive plays on offense, there's only two people creating them, I believe, and one of them is Marvin Harrison Jr. The other one is Trey. I think Trey's needed. The offensive line has definitely been hitting their stride. They've been doing a better job, but they would benefit from a guy who's capable of bouncing it when things are kind of a little bit, mucked up inside. And there were times where Mayan tried to bounce it and tried to get outside. And it's like, oh, brother, little bro just doesn't have a gas tank to get out there.
I mean, you saw a couple stiff arms on the defensive ends that just slowed him so much in the backfield, and he just wasn't able to get away from him. And I'm just looking, I'm like, if that's Chip or Travion, I don't even think they get a stiff arm because I don't think the defensive ends are going to be able to reach him because they would have bounced that so much. And that's what I'm talking about when I say they bring different things to this offense when they're running.
Like they bring, bro, he brings juice to the run game.
Absolutely. And the fact that like he's willing to just bounce things when he doesn't see it. And that's not normally the play, where you'll see some of those running backs that are so well coached that they'll run right into their offensive lineman and be like, that's where the play told me to go. And they'll fall over right at the line of scrimmage. Trey sees a pile up. He's like, I'm out of here. I'm going outside. We'll see what happens. We're going to go on a dead sprint horizontally, and we'll see who can get upfield vertical first when I decide to turn my hips. So I think that is definitely an element that we are missing, that, hey, this just isn't there. I'm going to take this outside. And I don't think that Chop has the speed to do that.
Dog, that's where I'm at with Trey, bro. Like last year, I was so frustrated with Trey because all Trey wanted to do was color outside the lines. I want him to color inside the lines. Now I'm looking at all these running backs. All their artwork looks the same color inside the lines. And I'm looking at the kid over there painting all over the canvas. Hey, it's abstract. Is it frustrating? Yes. As an Eli Manning fan, I can't believe I didn't see it sooner. Is he going to bounce stuff? Yeah. But every once in a while, he's going to bounce stuff, and it's going to go crazy, and you're going to beat Notre Dame because that's what happened.
Little Picasso, get in the game.
That's what I'm saying. Little Picasso. Nobody can guard him in the paint. He's an artist. Shout out John Wall. Will Trey have under 100 yards, between 100 and 150, or in the words of Flying AQ, we see in 1K Trey go for 150 plus?
I'm going with over 100. I think they try to get Trey rolling, get him comfortable. I don't think that we're going to see. I honestly think that we're going to throw the ball less this game just because they are going to try to limit opportunities of Kyle getting hit. Yeah. With Devin Brown being out, I promise you, Ryan Day has zero interest in playing his backups, Tristan Gebbia or Lincoln Kienholz yet. So I would imagine this is going to be a keep Kyle's jersey clean game. And that's why for one of my bold predictions, I'm going to say this team gives up 0 sacks on Saturday, just because I could imagine one of the biggest emphasis inside the Woody this week is keep Kyle upright, because we're going straight to our third string if he gets hurt.
Yeah, I shed a tear when I saw Dev get twisted up. I was not doing well. I think they are going to run the ball, run heavy. I do expect some news to come out of the running back room about a change, but I'm not sure when. But at least for me, I think Trey goes over 150. I think we're going to see the explosion with the fresh legs, and he's coming back at the perfect time. Like, he's not coming back while the offensive line is still trying to figure it out. They figured it out. They look good. They contained one of the better defensive lines in the country, and they held the Big Ten sack leader at the time to like 2 pressures. So this is someone who's figuring it out. I do think if they do drop back, you can see some screens and stuff for him to get him in space like they did a lot last year. I'm excited for Trey. I got Trey over 150 yards. Now, got to talk about the man, because I think this Ohio State team is good everywhere. I think the only place where there may be a little bit of a liability is at quarterback, because I think Kyle is more of a game manager, and that's okay if you're good everywhere. A.J. McCarron, Stetson Bennett, guys like that, we've seen it. Marvin Harrison Jr. is the best player in America. And when he is featured in the offense like this that doesn't really have a ton of weapons, you feel his impact like a ton of bricks. How impressive to you, at least, has Marvin Harrison Jr. been?
Insanely impressive. I mean, he leads the Big Ten in receiving, and it's crazy how spoiled we've become with the Ryan Day's offense because, man, it's like it feels like this offense is struggling. It just doesn't feel the same is what you hear from Buckeye fans when they talk about this passing attack. And then you look, Ohio State is the number one passing attack in the Big Ten. So while it may not be as explosive as it was before, we still have the best wide receiver and potentially the best player in all of college football. And I think he has been spectacular this season.
Yeah, it's done differently. It's not as pretty as people would like it because it's not 3 elite wide receivers. It's 1. And the 1 just happens to be maybe one of the most talented to ever come to Ohio State. I think he should be in the Heisman conversation. I think we're in the middle of a Heisman campaign. I think because of that, when they do drop back, they're going to push the ball to Marvin Harrison Jr. He only has 2 touchdowns this year. Are you ready to put it on wax that Marv will have multiple touchdowns against Wisconsin this week?
Is Cade Stover out?
Cade Stover's not out.
No, then no. If we have our number 1 target, Cade Stover, available, Marv's not catching 2 touchdowns because that seems to be the first look for this offense.
Farmer Gronk.
Farmer Gronk. As long as Cade Stover's playing, I would not suggest a 2 touchdown betting on 2 touchdowns for Marvin Harrison Jr.
I'm with our guy C. Lewis in the chat. I got 150 and 2 tutties. Marv's the only receiver out there.
You heard it first because that is one darn bold prediction.
Yep. There it is. There it is. Marv, 150, 2 touchdowns. For you, will Marv have under 75, between 75 100 and 100, 100 to 125, or over 125?
I'm going to go over 125 with the type of targets that they've been going for. 11 receptions last week. I feel like, we talked about it on the post game. Ryan Day remembered where his bread is buttered. It's with the number 1 player in the country. And there's been an emphasis to get him the ball more. I think we see a big day from Trey. I think we see a big day from Marv. But I think the touchdown, I don't know if we're going to see 2 of them.
Yeah, we're starting to see Ryan Day really lean on exploiting the talent gap, and that's big. So here we go. My final bold predictions. I've got Sonny Styles with a pick 6. I've got Marv 2 touchdowns, and then 1 more. That's all I got.
My 2 bold predictions are 100+ yards from Travion Henderson and 0 sacks from this offensive line. I feel like Justin Fry and Ryan Day have emphasized this all week. I think the players know what is behind Kyle McCord and how important it is to keep him healthy this week. And I think the biggest thing getting out of this game is leaving with health. I know that this is a team with a good record. I know that Wisconsin is no walkover, but I think the Buckeyes need to worry about keeping guys healthy and finding a way to get out of this game. If this game isn't the prettiest because they were running the ball more and it was a little slower tempo, less possessions, I am completely fine with that if that means keeping these guys healthy.
Sensational. Sounds like a Bucks win to me. Ron, get us out of here.
Big shout out to Bleacher Report for having us. Glad to be here. We will be back on Monday. And yeah, if you want to find me, you can find me on Twitter at 2_TEES. And man, I'm going to keep my eyes glued to this Michigan investigation because I cannot get enough of it. Chris, let the people know where they can find you.
Every weekday, Menace to Sports, hanging out, going live, talking all things across the Midwest and honestly across the nation when it comes to college football. Other than that, catch me here with Ron twice a week.
Big thank you to Bleacher Report. Go Bucks and OH.
I-O.